The alien princess cornered the human. He knew why she trembled. He had imagined 1,000 possible first impressions of the Xylar homeworld: golden cities, singing towers, endless ranks of soldiers. But none of those images matched the place that rose before him. The palace sprawled like a grown thing, curved and smooth, its surfaces catching the sky in slices. At ground level, gardens hid between columns. Above, terraces folded into one another, and far away, the city glowed with a steady, low pulse that might have been light or heart. Elias kept his hands loose at his sides. He had been an explorer most of his life, and explorers learned a quiet patience. You learn to wait and listen. That patience had carried him through asteroid storms and through the rules and customs of more than a dozen alien worlds. Still, this moment felt different. It was a diplomatic mission, not a trading stop or a rescue. That difference had weight. It felt like a step taken with hands folded in public. Every small motion counted. A line of Xylar attendants moved around him like reeds in the wind. Their faces were sharp, their skin the color of river stones, and their eyes held a stillness that made Elias think of deep water. They wore robes with many folds, and they moved with the deliberate grace of people who had learned to control every gesture. One of them, a gray-faced woman with a thin collar of silver, stepped forward and spoke through a small device. The device painted words into Elias' hearing in a voice that was not quite mechanical. It rendered Xylar soft into the rougher cadence of his language. "You are Captain Elias Vorn," the voice said. Elias lifted his chin. "I am," he replied. He let his words come plain. "I speak for the Commonwealth delegation. I am here to open a peaceful dialogue." The attendants did not smile. They did not need to. From somewhere deeper in the palace, footsteps answered theirs, fast, almost a panic in their rhythm. The trading hall was a distance away, a great chamber with many windows. At its center, seated upon a low platform, sat the woman who was to be the face of the Xylar to the human delegation, Princess Lyra. Lyra was everything the official files had said, and not everything at the same time. The files had shown a statue, a carved thing with sharp lines and haloed hair. Seeing her live shook the edges of that image. She sat with a posture of practiced command, but Elias noticed the small, human things that photos never caught. Her hands rested folded in her lap, fingers long and precise. Her lips were pressed into a line. Her eyes moved quickly, taking him in, as if measuring his weight and then his intention. When they were brought together, she rose. The motion made the room seem to tilt, and Elias thought for a moment that he felt the whole palace incline toward them. Lyra walked with the slow, elegant certainty of someone born to rule. Her skin had a cool sheen, like mother of pearl, and she carried a faint scent of jasmine and metal, an odd pairing Elias could not name. Her robes were a rich blue that had the depth of twilight. She came closer and stopped at the distance that Xylar etiquette required. Her hand went to her throat. For the barest instant, faster than a blink, her fingers trembled. Elias saw it and the world narrowed. He saw the tremor in the soft joint of her wrist, how her collarbone moved under white skin. He saw the tiny catch in her breath and the way her eyes looked right at him and then away, as if embarrassed. He did not look away. On the human side of the delegation, whispers fluttered like moths. The translators hummed. An officer cleared his throat and made a motion Elias did not answer. He stepped forward and bowed in the human way, not a deep, subservient bend, but a gesture of respect. "Princess Lyra," he said, "it is an honor." She inclined her head, small and formal. And then, as the translator repeated Elias' words in the high, clean Xylar tones, she struggled for a beat with the guard she had been taught to wear in public. Her hands smoothed the folds of her robe, and she answered with a voice that was steady enough when she spoke to the room but soft when she spoke to him. "The honor is ours. You come from beyond the rim. You come in peace." Elias could have kept the talk to the scripted words and let the diplomats take over. That was the safer way. This was not the moment for personal risk, and there were enough eyes on them to make a misstep dangerous. But the tremor had done something strange. It made him real in a way nothing else could. A leader was not just a title. A leader could tremble. He stepped a fraction closer. "Your Highness," he said, "I am Elias Vorn. I have asked for this meeting because humans want to understand. We want to learn your ways and to share ours. We do not come to take, only to speak." Her eyes flicked to his face. He offered her the most human thing he had, a small, honest smile. He did not know if Xyler considered smiling a sign of weakness, but he had used it in rocky ports and on nervous bridges, and it had always bought him time. Lyra watched him with emotion so slight it might have been simply the play of light. She let the translator carry his words into the room in a voice that felt like water over stone. Then she answered in her tongue, "Why meet with one who is not of our kind? Why choose this moment?" That was the question that had been in the reports back on the Commonwealth ship, the one no diplomat wanted to ask out loud. Elias faced it straight. "Because both sides are changing," he said. "There are those among us who want more than borders. There are those who fear the unknown, but we have more to lose by not knowing each other than by trying to meet halfway." Lyra's fingers trembled again, this time almost invisible. She held the motion like a secret. Elias thought of the briefings he had been given in the hours before his arrival. He had been told of Xyler law, of the old edicts that shaped their people, that the royal line must not be seen as taking sides, that any sign of favoritism could be used by rivals to weave a claim of weakness, that treaties must be made with caution because of how quickly change could be weaponized. He had been handed documents and charts, told of clan rivalries and a history of cold wars. He had been warned to speak with care. None of those papers had prepared him for the sight of Lyra's hand, nor for the way she watched him as if she measured the possible futures he might bring. "I know your duties," he said softly. "I know how the weight of a crown changes a person you are close to. I have lost friends because of the choice to stay or to leave. If this is about politics, then tell me what you fear. I do not promise to fix it, only to hear." Silence stretched, but not the empty kind. It was full of the small, warm breath of a human speaking to a being from a different star and offering a human comfort. Lyra did not step back. She let the sound of his words settle like dust. The attendants, the translators, the delegation, everyone waited, and some of them must have waited with the kind of fear that belongs on both sides of a knife. At last, Lyra's voice changed. It dropped to a softer tone. She chose English then, not because she preferred it, but because some truths did not translate well between languages. "I tremble," she said, "because a meeting like this can be a spark. Sparks start fires. A princess who leans toward one side can be accused of treason. A princess who trusts a foreigner can be shown weakness. I have been raised to speak with two voices, one for the people, one for the court. Both demand different things. Meeting you is a choice that may make some of my own people turn against me." Elias heard no arrogance in her words. He heard the plain, human thing beneath, the small, slow terror of a young leader who must decide for many. "You fear the consequences," he said, "not the man." Her shoulders moved, an almost invisible nod. Lyra's gaze found his again, and this time something like relief moved through her face. She was not smiling. She was not supposed to be smiling. But in the way her body eased, Elias felt the room lose some of its sharpness. "If this meeting leads to trouble," she said, "then it will be because I chose to risk my people. If I tremble, it is because I must hold that risk and not let it show. That is the law of my line." Elias thought of the marks of his own duty, the letters he carried, the flag stitched into the lapel of his jacket, the men and women back on his ship who would look to him to bring back answers. Duty was a common language. He let his hand rest without ceremony against the wooden railing that framed the platform, an old human gesture of grounding himself. "Then let us talk carefully," he said. He kept his voice simple and his tone steady. "Tell me what your people need. Tell me what you would guard. I will not demand more than you give." They talked for hours. It was not the long embassy that some histories might record. No treaties were signed, no grand proclamations made. But it was the beginning that matters in any story, the first honest words. Over cups of a drink that tasted faintly of mint and iron, Elias listened as Lyra described the way her people had grown inward, how the Xylar had once built colonies and then closed their borders, how fear had hardened into law. She spoke of rival houses that watched the throne and of the old technology, kept secret for generations, that had once saved and once destroyed cities. Elias spoke of his own world in plain lines. He told of the Commonwealth's messy history, of how humans learned to build and to break, often in the same breath. He told her simple things that meant a great deal, that humans mistake silence for hostility sometimes, that they value humor because it makes hard things soft, that they bring tools and mistakes both, and that sometimes their mistakes taught them more than their successes. Lyra laughed then, a sound like a single bell. It did something odd to the air in the room, like a small breeze finding a still lake. "Humor," she said, "a dangerous thing among my people. We do not like frivolity around matters of state." Elias shrugged with a human awkwardness. "We do. It keeps us sane." As they traded stories, the tension that had lived in Lyra's fingers loosened bit by bit. She still trembled when she thought of the court and the watchers. That fear was an ember beneath her skin. But the tremor began to show itself less as prelude to disaster and more as a sign of something raw and honest. Elias felt a small triumph, not of victory but of connection. Outside, the palace moved as palaces must. Attendants came and went like a tide. The delegation took notes. Cameras, thin, lens-like devices, watched both of them from high corners. But between Lyra and Elias, the edges smoothed. They found a language that was neither purely human nor purely Xylar. It was the simple truth that two beings were trying to learn about each other. Then the alarm began. At first it was a low pulse, impossible to localize. Cups rattled. An attendant dropped a tray and it sounded loud as a cannon. People in the room started. The translator devices changed pitch and a new voice, urgent and cold, filled the space. Lyra's eyes went hard at once. Where she had allowed small cracks, duty clamped them shut. Elias moved by instinct, not by doctrine. He rose and took a step for the door, but Lyra placed a hand, a gesture of quiet command, on his forearm. Her fingers were steady now. The tremor had vanished. In its place was the armor of a woman who had to hold her house together. "Wait," she said. Her voice was now the voice of a state. "The palace is secure. We will not lead you into danger." There was shouting beyond the doors, out in the halls, and not the controlled shouting of training but the ragged noise of people uncertain where to run. An attendant flung open a side door and returned, breathless. "An incursion," he said in Xylar, and the translators turned it into human words with a hard edge. "Unknown vessels have breached the outer wards. We suspect sabotage." Lyra's face did not change. Her jaw set. She looked at Elias like a general judging a new officer. "You came to speak of peace," she said. "Perhaps this is an answer to that, or perhaps it is a provocation. Either way, we must act." Elias felt the cold line of danger that diplomacy taught him to dread. It was the moment that sharpened into choice. Retreat and leave the palace to its fate, or stay and share the risk. He had come to speak for peace, but he had not come to stand aside when people were in need. He bowed to Lyra, an old human sign, a small gesture of respect and solidarity. "I will stay," he said. "If your house needs help, tell me what to do." Her eyes flicked toward the door, toward the attendants now moving with a calm trained by years. She nodded once. "Then do not speak like a stranger when fighting like a friend," she said. "We must move to the observation deck. From there we can see what they bring." They moved as the palace moved, with purpose and an efficient quiet. The windows that framed the city showed stars and the distant line of ships, small points that became large in moments like this. Elias kept to Lyra's right, learning by the way she walked, the small cuts of her gaze. He watched her hands, no tremors now, and he thought of all the young leaders he had seen who had been forced to grow up in a single night. As the observation deck doors closed behind them, sealing them into a bubble of glass and light, Elias felt the air tighten. He thought about how small their conversation had been compared to the length of human history, and how dangerous it was that a simple meeting could blow up into war. He thought about the weight of a single human hand linked to a single Xylar one, and the fact that, for now, they were joined by choice. Outside, the city continued to glow, unaware or unwilling to be quiet. The alarms painted the sky with a new color. Lyra stood at the glass and watched. Elias stood beside her and watched with her. She did not tremble, not now. But he knew why she had earlier when her fingers had told him the truth she had not spoken, because a princess can be a force that loosens or binds the world. He had known then that this meeting was not just a diplomatic success or a failure. It was the kind of moment that could change what it meant to be a people. The observation deck sounded a long warning. Down in the streets, something moved like a dark thing under the light. Lyra's mouth tightened into a line he had seen before in the faces of commanders. She turned to him. "We must decide," she said, "and we must decide quickly." Elias nodded. He felt the press of duty on both sides now, to his own people, to the strangers who had sheltered him, and to the simple human truth that one should not stand aside when someone trembles in fear. He squared his shoulders. The room sang with the alarm and the small sound of his life, the steady breath of a man who had crossed a galaxy to stand in another's respect, felt loud. Outside, the first lights of the intruders painted the palace walls. Inside, the human and the princess prepared to face whatever would come next. The first alarm had barely faded when the second began, a harsher, sharper sound that cut through the palace like a blade. Elias and Princess Lyra moved through the observation deck with purpose, their eyes scanning the city below. Outside, the invaders' ships moved in precise lines, like predators circling a herd. They were smaller than the Xylar vessels but faster, more agile, and their weapons glowed with a cold, green energy that made the palace's shields hum in response. Lyra's hands were steady on the railing now. The tremor that had betrayed her earlier fear was gone, replaced by a hard control that came from years of training and duty. Elias noticed it, admired it, but did not comment. There was no time for admiration. "The outer wards are compromised," Lyra said, her voice low but firm. "They have found a weak point. Someone inside our walls opened it for them." Elias frowned. "A traitor?" he asked. Lyra nodded, her jaw tight. "It is possible. The palace has many allies and enemies even within the council. We cannot be sure who has betrayed us. We must assume any movement could be a threat." Elias took a deep breath. He had faced danger before: pirates, storms, hostile aliens. But there was something different about this. The threat was not only physical, it was political, personal, and unpredictable. Every step they took through the palace corridors could trigger a trap. Every decision could be questioned by unseen observers. She led him to a side corridor, one of the ancient passageways that twisted beneath the palace like roots. The walls were lined with carved patterns that pulsed faintly with energy, a mix of old technology and artistry. Elias ran his hand along the smooth surface, feeling the hum beneath his fingers. It was alive, a reminder that this was not a human building. "This way," Lyra said. "The observation deck will give us a view of their approach, but we need to move closer to the palace core. The central control hub is here, and if we can reach it, we can lock down the inner defenses and limit the damage." Elias followed, careful not to step too heavily. The corridors were quiet, too quiet, and the faint pulse of alarms in the distance reminded him that danger could be anywhere. Every corner could hide an enemy, every door could conceal a trap. He had learned to move like a shadow, to observe and react, and now those skills were essential. They reached a junction where the corridor split into multiple directions. Lyra paused, listening. She pressed her hand to the wall, and a soft hum responded. She turned to him, her eyes sharp. "Some of these corridors are sealed by ancient locks," she said. "I can open them, but it will take time. Every second counts." Elias nodded. "Then let's choose wisely." They moved toward a heavy door marked with symbols that glowed faintly in response to Lyra's touch. With a soft hiss, the door slid open, revealing a chamber filled with consoles, screens, and controls that Elias could barely understand. Lights blinked across panels in patterns that suggested monitoring, defense, and communication. "This is the central hub," Lyra said. "From here, I can control many of the palace's defenses, but the intruders have already disrupted some systems. We may have only one chance to stop them before they reach the core." Elias studied the consoles. He did not know the exact functions, but he could see patterns, inputs, and outputs. He had a mind for systems, and he knew that with careful observation, he could predict some of the intruders' moves. "Let me try something," he said. He reached for a console and began pressing buttons, adjusting flows and observing changes. "If I reroute the power here, it may create a temporary barrier. It won't hold forever, but it could buy us time." Lyra watched him, her eyes narrowing. "Be careful. That area is sensitive. One wrong move and the entire hub could shut down." "I understand," he said. His fingers moved over the controls with precision. The hum of energy shifted, and the lights on the panels blinked in response. A small section of the palace's outer wall shimmered as a barrier formed, blocking the invaders' path temporarily. Lyra exhaled softly. "Good. That will give us a moment to plan our next step." Elias looked at her. "You were afraid earlier," he said. "I saw it, but now you're focused, precise. You didn't let fear control you." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Fear is a luxury I cannot afford," she said. "Every move I make affects thousands. Trembling is allowed only in private and only for a heartbeat. I have no time for more than that." Elias nodded, understanding more than she realized. Leadership was never easy, especially when the stakes were this high. "Then let's make that heartbeat count." They left the hub, moving deeper into the palace. The corridors were tighter here, older, and less familiar even to Lyra. Shadows stretched along the walls, and the hum of energy beneath their feet was uneven, a warning that the building itself was alive and aware. "Do you trust me?" Elias asked. Lyra paused, her eyes flicking toward him. "I trust you to survive," she said. "I do not yet trust you with my people's secrets." "Fair enough," he replied. "Trust is earned, not given." They reached a spiral stair that led down to the inner sanctum, a place where few outsiders had ever set foot. The air grew warmer, heavier, and the pulse of the palace's energy became a steady thrum. Elias felt it in his chest, a vibration that made him aware of every step, every breath. As they descended, they heard movement ahead, footsteps hurried and uneven. Lyra pressed herself against the wall, signaling Elias to do the same. A group of intruders appeared, moving quickly but cautiously. They wore armor that glowed faintly, and their faces were hidden behind helmets. They did not speak, but their weapons were raised. Lyra motioned to Elias. "We cannot fight them head-on. Follow my lead." They slipped into a side alcove, using shadows and the narrowness of the corridor to their advantage. Elias marveled at her skill, the way she moved with precision, her steps silent but assured. The trembling he had seen earlier was gone. This was a leader in full command. The intruders passed, unaware of their presence. Elias let out a quiet breath. "Impressive," he whispered. Lyra glanced at him. "Impressive is not enough," she said. "We must be clever." They continued deeper, reaching a chamber that was older than the palace itself. The walls were etched with symbols, and in the center, a pedestal held an object that glowed with an inner light. Elias could feel its power even from a distance. "That is the relic," Lyra said. "It has been guarded for generations. It can protect the palace, but in the wrong hands it can destroy it." Elias' eyes widened. "Then we must keep it safe," Lyra nodded. "And that is why I trembled. Not from fear of you, but from the knowledge that this power could fall into the wrong hands. I have trained for battles, for politics, for survival, but I have never faced a choice like this. A human by my side changes the odds, yes, but it also adds uncertainty." Elias stepped closer to the pedestal, careful not to touch the relic. "Uncertainty is what humans deal with every day," he said. "We adapt. We find solutions. That is why I am here." Lyra studied him, her eyes searching for any sign of deceit. She found none. "Then we will work together," she said. "But remember, one mistake could cost everything." They set to work, Lyra guiding Elias through the palace's systems, showing him how to activate defenses without triggering traps. His mind worked quickly, learning patterns, anticipating moves, and offering solutions that were unconventional but effective. As they worked, the intruders advanced. They reached the inner gates, where the palace's shields were thinnest. The green glow of their weapons cut through the darkness, and the hum of energy became a roar. Lyra and Elias activated a series of defenses, rerouting energy and sealing passages. The intruders were slowed, their movements disrupted, but they did not retreat. They adapted quickly, testing the palace's weaknesses. Elias realized that the invaders were using Xylar technology against them, a clever imitation that made every step dangerous. He whispered to Lyra, "They know our systems. Someone inside has betrayed us completely." Her eyes darkened. "I suspected as much. We must prepare for confrontation." They reached a narrow platform overlooking the main hall. From here, they could see the invaders moving, their numbers growing. The palace's defenders were engaged but struggling. Lyra turned to Elias. "We have one chance to stop them before they reach the core. Are you ready?" Elias nodded, his hands steady on the railing. "Ready." Together they stepped forward, two unlikely allies in a palace under siege. The tremor that had haunted Lyra earlier was gone, replaced by focus, strategy, and the unspoken trust that comes when survival depends on cooperation. The first intruder appeared on the platform below, and the battle began. Weapons flared, energy pulses collided with shields, and the palace shook with the force of conflict. Elias and Lyra moved with precision, coordinating attacks, sealing doors, and outmaneuvering the invaders. Elias marveled at Lyra's skill, the way she anticipated moves, the way she gave commands that were obeyed instantly. She was no longer a trembling princess. She was a commander, a leader, and a protector of her people. As the battle raged, Elias realized that humanity and Xylar ingenuity combined could overcome almost any threat. His heart pounded, his mind raced, but he felt a strange calm. They had a chance, and they were taking it together. Outside, the city watched, unaware or indifferent, as a human and an alien princess held the line. And in that moment, Elias understood why she had trembled earlier. It was not fear of him. It was the weight of responsibility, the burden of choice, and the knowledge that even the smallest misstep could change the fate of an entire world. Now, there was no room for fear. Only action, strategy, and the unspoken bond that had formed between them in the heat of crisis. The invaders advanced, but Elias and Lyra were ready. And together, they would face whatever came next. The inner sanctum was quiet, almost impossibly so, after the storm of alarms and the clash of energy weapons. Elias followed Princess Lyra through the narrow corridors, their boots barely making a sound against the polished floor. The hum of the palace underfoot was steady now, almost like a heartbeat, guiding them deeper into the heart of the structure. Outside, the intruders were regrouping, their ships circling the palace like black sharks. The city below shimmered under the Xylar lights, untouched yet vulnerable, and Elias felt the weight of every moment pressing on him. Lyra's eyes moved constantly, scanning the walls, the shadows, every movement that might signal danger. Her previous tremor had vanished, replaced by a disciplined calm that reminded Elias why she was the heir to this world. Yet there was tension beneath her composure, a subtle tightening at the corners of her mouth and the way her fingers sometimes flexed without her noticing. He knew then that this calm was not absence of fear, it was control. "We need to reach the chamber beneath the palace core," she said. "It holds the secondary controls, the last defense before the central hub. If the intruders breach that, the palace could fall in minutes." Elias nodded. He had learned to trust her judgment, and more than that, he had learned to move with it. His own fear was present but harnessed. They had survived the outer wards, and now the challenge was closer, more immediate, and far more personal. As they descended a spiral stair that led to a lower level, the walls began to change. The smooth, polished panels gave way to older stone, etched with symbols that glowed faintly under Lyra's touch. These corridors were ancient, remnants of a time before the palace had been a seat of power, before the Xylar had sealed themselves off from the galaxy. Elias felt the hum of energy stronger here, more concentrated, almost alive. "Be careful," Lyra warned. "The palace's defenses are not just mechanical. Some of these systems respond to presence, to intent. One wrong move, and we trigger more than alarms." Elias moved carefully, watching the patterns in the walls and floors. He noticed small shifts in energy, almost like the palace was watching them back. It was unsettling, but he focused on his training. Observation, deduction, patience. The same skills that had kept him alive on hostile worlds now guided him through a palace that seemed to think for itself. They reached a junction where multiple passages converged. Lyra pressed her hand against a glowing symbol and the wall shifted slightly, revealing a narrow corridor. The glow flickered as if the palace was hesitant, testing their purpose. Elias stepped through, following her lead, his senses alert. Ahead, a low rumble shook the floor. Lyra's eyes sharpened. "They are close," she said. "The intruders are adapting. Someone inside is feeding them information." Elias frowned. "A traitor." She did not answer immediately. Instead, she led him through the corridor, moving with silent authority. "It is likely," she said at last, "but we cannot waste time speculating. We have to act." They emerged into a wider chamber, the air thick with energy. In the center stood the relic, glowing softly, a core of light and power. Elias could feel its presence even from a distance, a vibration in his chest that made his skin tingle. "That is what I feared most," Lyra said quietly. "If this falls into their hands, the palace, the city, everything could be destroyed." Elias stepped closer, careful not to touch it. "Then we keep it safe," he said. "No one touches it without our permission." Lyra studied him, her eyes searching. "And you, human, can you keep your people safe? Can you make the choices that matter?" Elias met her gaze. "I have had to make difficult choices before. I can make them again." She nodded slightly, a small acknowledgement of trust. Then she turned toward a console on the far wall, her fingers moving over the controls with practiced precision. Elias watched, learning the sequences, noting the patterns. The palace responded to her touch, opening defensive grids, sealing doors, redirecting energy flows. "Follow my instructions exactly," she said. "One mistake and the intruders could reach the core." Elias moved with her guidance, his hands steady, his mind sharp. Together, they activated defenses, rerouted power, and created barriers that shifted with the intruders' movements. Outside, green energy pulses flared as the enemy adapted, testing the palace's strength, but Lyra and Elias anticipated each move, countering with precision and ingenuity. "It's working," Elias said, his voice low. "We're slowing them down." Lyra's eyes did not leave the controls. "Yes, but only for a moment. They will find another path. We must prepare for confrontation." Suddenly, a shadow moved across the chamber entrance. Elias turned, weapon ready, and saw a group of intruders slip through a side passage. Their weapons glowed, aimed, and ready. "Here they come," Lyra said, her voice calm but commanding. "Do not hesitate." They moved together, a coordinated force. Lyra directed the palace's energy to intercept the attackers, while Elias used his understanding of tactics to exploit weaknesses in their formation. The intruders faltered, their advance slowed by the combination of Xylar technology and human improvisation. Elias marveled at Lyra's skill. She was no longer the trembling princess he had first met. She was a commander, decisive and unyielding, able to anticipate moves before they happened. Her focus was absolute, and her fear had transformed into determination. They pressed deeper into the inner chamber, keeping the relic safe and the intruders at bay. Elias realized that their partnership was more than necessity. It was trust, built in the heat of danger, a bond that neither of them could have predicted. A sudden tremor shook the floor, stronger than before. The palace itself seemed to react, a pulse of energy that made the walls hum and the lights flicker. Lyra's eyes widened briefly. "The palace knows something," she said. "It senses the intruder's intent." Elias nodded. "Then we use it. Let's turn the palace's power against them." Working together, they channeled the energy through defensive grids, creating barriers that funneled the intruders into a narrow corridor. The invaders stumbled, disoriented by the shifting defenses, their movements clumsy against the palace's calculated response. Lyra and Elias moved quickly, striking when opportunities appeared, redirecting power to block attacks and keeping the relic protected. Each move required precision, timing, and trust. They were a single unit, human and Xylar, combining knowledge and instinct in a way that neither could achieve alone. The intruders tried to regroup, but the palace's defenses were relentless. Doors sealed, energy pulses blocked paths, and the narrow corridors forced the attackers into disadvantageous positions. Elias used his tactical knowledge to anticipate their next moves, guiding Lyra's commands to the palace systems. "They are faltering," he said. "We have the advantage." Lyra did not relax. "Advantage is temporary. They will adapt, and we must be ready when they do." The intruders split, attempting to flank them through hidden passages. Elias noticed a subtle shift in energy patterns and intercepted them before they could reach the relic. The corridor became a trap, a funnel that forced the attackers into predictable paths. Lyra's eyes flashed with approval. "Good. Human intuition complements Xylar's strategy well." Elias allowed himself a small smile. "And your training complements my improvisation." Together, they pushed the intruders back, step by step, securing the inner sanctum. The relic's light pulsed with a steady rhythm, a heartbeat of power that reassured them both. Then came the final challenge. A figure emerged from the shadows, taller than the others, moving with deliberate precision. Elias recognized it as a traitor from the council, someone who had guided the intruders through secret passages. Lyra stiffened. "The betrayer," she said. "I should have known." The figure raised a weapon, energy crackling along its length. Elias and Lyra moved as one, coordinating attacks. Lyra directed the palace's defenses, while Elias maneuvered to intercept the betrayer. The battle was tense, each strike calculated, each move critical. The traitor's skill was formidable, but the combination of Elias' adaptability and Lyra's command proved stronger. They forced the intruder back, cutting off escape routes, and finally, with a coordinated strike, neutralized the threat. Lyra stepped forward, her gaze steady. "It is done," she said. "The palace is secure for now." Elias exhaled, relief mixing with exhaustion. "For now," he echoed. He glanced at the relic, its glow steady and unbroken. "We protected it together." Lyra studied him, a rare softness in her eyes. "Yes, together. And you have earned a measure of trust today, human. Not full trust, but a beginning." Elias nodded. "A beginning is all we need to start." They stood together, the inner sanctum calm for the first time since the alarms had begun. Outside, the city remained unaware of how close it had come to disaster. But inside, a human and an alien princess had forged a bond through strategy, courage, and shared danger. Lyra's hands were steady now, her earlier tremor completely gone. Elias understood why it had been there at first. Not fear of him, but the weight of responsibility, the knowledge of what could be lost. And now, with action taken and trust earned, that tremor had transformed into resolve. Elias felt a new respect for Lyra, not only as a leader but as someone willing to face impossible choices and hold herself accountable. And he felt something deeper, a recognition that their combined skills could overcome almost any threat, as long as they remained united. The palace hummed around them, alive with energy and potential. Outside, the first signs of the intruders' retreat flickered across the city. For the moment, peace had returned, fragile but present. Lyra turned to Elias. "Rest is brief," she said. "We do not know if this is the end or only a pause. The galaxy is unpredictable and we must be ready." Elias nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "Then we prepare, together." And in that moment, in the quiet hum of the palace and the soft glow of the relic, the human and the princess found not only survival but the beginning of understanding, a fragile alliance that could shape the future of two worlds. The tremor that had once betrayed fear had become a symbol of resolve, and Elias knew that whatever came next, they would face it side by side. The palace was quiet, but not safe. Elias and Princess Lyra moved through the corridors with careful steps, every sound amplified in the stillness. The intruders had been pushed back for now, but the retreating energy pulses and the glow of distant ships warned that the threat was far from over. Outside, the Xylar city continued its rhythm, unaware of the storm that had passed and the one that might return at any moment. Lyra's eyes were sharp, scanning every corner, every shadow. Her hands were steady on the railing as they approached the central chamber, the heart of the palace. Elias felt the hum of the relic beneath the floor, a constant presence that reminded him of the stakes. The relic was not just a weapon or a shield. It was a symbol of the Xylar people's power, the focus of their history, and the key to the palace's survival. "We need to secure the core," Lyra said. "If they reach it, everything will fall. The city, the palace, our people, they will all pay the price." Elias nodded. "Then we hold it together, human and Xylar, no matter what comes." They moved with precision, their footsteps silent but confident. The corridors here were ancient, etched with symbols that glowed faintly under Lyra's touch. Elias felt the energy pulse stronger as they approached the core, almost like the palace itself was aware of their purpose. A sudden vibration shook the floor, stronger than before. Elias glanced at Lyra, who did not flinch. The intruders were advancing again, this time with greater coordination and strength. They were not just attacking, they were testing, probing for weaknesses. Lyra pressed her hand against a console, activating defensive grids that shimmered into place. Elias observed, understanding patterns and suggesting adjustments. Together, they created a dynamic defense, shifting energy flows to intercept the intruders' movements. "They are clever," Elias said, "but we can outthink them." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "Clever is not enough. We must anticipate, adapt, and act before they do." The intruders entered the inner corridor, their weapons glowing and ready. Elias and Lyra moved to a platform overlooking the central hall. From here, they could see the intruders' formations, their strategy, and their weaknesses. "Use the palace," Lyra said. "Its energy responds to intent. We can channel it against them." Elias nodded. He had learned to read patterns and improvise, and now he combined his human instinct with Lyra's knowledge of the palace systems. They redirected energy flows, creating barriers and obstacles that forced the intruders into narrow corridors where their numbers counted for less. The first intruder stumbled, caught in a shifting field of energy. The second tried to bypass it, only to find the walls subtly moving, guiding them into a trap. Elias and Lyra worked in perfect coordination, their actions seamless, almost instinctive. "They are adapting," Lyra said. "Expect anything." Elias scanned the hall, noting small changes in energy patterns. "I see a weak point in their formation," he said. "If we strike there, we can turn the tide." Lyra's eyes met his. "Then we strike together." They moved in unison, directing the palace's energy through the weak point, creating a pulse that disrupted the intruders' movements. The attackers faltered, their strategy broken by the combination of human improvisation and Xylar precision. One of the intruders tried to flank them through a hidden passage. Elias noticed the subtle shift in energy and intercepted it, blocking their advance with calculated precision. Lyra activated a secondary barrier, cutting off escape routes and forcing the intruder back into the main hall. "You move well," Lyra said, her voice low but approving. "Better than I expected." Elias allowed himself a small smile. "Your guidance helps. And your strategy is formidable." They continued their advance, pushing the intruders back step by step. The palace responded to their intent, shifting walls and energy flows to create defensive advantages. Each move required careful coordination, trust, and quick thinking. Then came the final challenge. A figure emerged from the shadows, taller and more imposing than the others. Elias recognized it as the traitor who had led the intruders through the palace. The figure's armor glowed with a darker energy, and their movements were precise and calculated. Lyra's expression hardened. "This is the one who betrayed us," she said. "He knows the palace as I do. We cannot allow him to reach the core." Elias nodded, gripping the controls and adjusting energy flows to anticipate the traitor's moves. "We will stop him," he said. "Together." The traitor advanced, energy weapon raised. Lyra and Elias moved as one, coordinating attacks, anticipating strikes, and exploiting weaknesses. The corridor became a deadly game of precision and strategy. The traitor struck first, a pulse of energy that slammed against the barrier Elias had created. Elias countered, redirecting energy to neutralize the strike, while Lyra activated a secondary field that trapped the attacker in a narrow corridor. "Now!" Elias shouted. They moved forward, using the palace's shifting energy and their combined tactics to corner the traitor. The intruder struggled, attempting to escape, but every move was anticipated, every strike countered. Finally, with a coordinated pulse of energy, they disarmed and subdued the traitor. Lyra stepped forward, her gaze steady. "It is over," she said. "The palace is secure." Elias exhaled, relief and exhaustion mingling. "For now," he said. He glanced at the relic, its light steady and unbroken. "We protected it together." Lyra studied him, a rare softness in her eyes. "Today, human, you have earned trust, not full trust, but a beginning." Elias nodded. "A beginning is enough. We will need it." They moved to the central core, securing it and reinforcing the palace's defenses. The relic pulsed steadily, a heartbeat of power and stability. Elias marveled at the combination of ancient technology and Lyra's skill. The palace was alive, responding to intent and guided by two allies who had learned to move as one. Outside, the city remained oblivious to how close it had come to destruction. But inside, a human and an alien princess had forged a bond through strategy, courage, and shared danger. Lyra turned to Elias. "Rest is brief. We do not know if this is the end or only a pause. The galaxy is unpredictable, and threats can return at any moment." Elias nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "Then we prepare, together." The tremor that had once betrayed her fear was gone, replaced by resolve. Elias understood now why she had trembled when they first met. It was not fear of him, but the burden of responsibility and the weight of the choices she had to make for her people. He felt a new respect for her, not only as a leader but as someone willing to face impossible challenges and hold herself accountable. And he felt a sense of purpose, knowing that humanity could stand alongside the Xylar, their skills and instincts complementing each other in the defense of life and civilization. The palace hummed around them, alive with energy and potential. Outside, the intruders had retreated, their green lights fading into the distance. For the moment, peace had returned, fragile but present. Lyra placed a hand on the console controlling the relic. "We have won today," she said softly, "but the galaxy will test us again. We must be ready always." Elia stood beside her, looking at the glowing city below. "Then we will face it," he said, "side by side, human and Xylar." And in that moment, the human and the princess found not only survival but understanding and partnership, a fragile alliance forged in the fires of battle and tempered by trust. The palace lights shifted softly, as if acknowledging their success, and the relic pulsed with steady rhythm. Elias knew that whatever came next, they would face it together, and that humanity had earned a place in a galaxy full of uncertainty, danger, and infinite possibility. The tremor that had once betrayed fear had become a symbol of resolve, and Elias knew that whatever challenges awaited, the bond they had forged would endure. Together, they had not only defended the palace, they had created the foundation for a future where humanity and Xylar could stand as allies, ready to face the unknown and the dangers yet to come. The city below continued to shine, and for the first time in many hours, Elias allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. They had faced the storm, survived, and proven that courage, intelligence, and trust could triumph against overwhelming odds. Princess Lyra looked at him, her gaze steady, no longer trembling but filled with recognition. "We will remember this day," she said, "as the day humans and Xylar fought together not as strangers but as allies." Elias nodded. "And we will be ready for the next." Together they stood at the heart of the palace, guardians of a relic, defenders of a world, and pioneers of a new alliance. Outside, the stars shone cold and distant, but inside, humanity had proven itself, worthy, capable, and ready for the challenges of the galaxy. The tremor was gone, the palace was secure, and a new chapter began. For Elias, for Lyra, and for the worlds they represented, the future was uncertain, but the bond they had forged would guide them, steady and unbroken, through whatever came next. And in the quiet pulse of the palace and the steady glow of the relic, they both knew one thing: humanity had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. The alien princess cornered the human. He knew why she trembled.